In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Dear viewers, a brief introduction to the origin of sonnet and description of some of the important types of sonnet are presented in this video. Giacomo da Lentini, the Italian poet, invented sonnet in the 13th century. Petrarch standardized sonnet in the 14th century. Thomas Wyatt imported sonnet from Italy to England in the 16th century by translating Petrarchan sonnets. Thomas Wyatt also created his own sonnets. The sonnets of Thomas Wyatt inspired other English poets to compose sonnets. Since then, poets have been composing sonnets and making experiments with this poetic genre. Different poets have brought about variations in the length and form of the sonnet, themes, meter, rhyme scheme, and volta. The title or the name of the type of the sonnet is usually based on the name of the poet who invented or brought about the variation in the sonnet. Shakespeare, Spenser, and Milton were great innovators. G.M. Hopkins invented a new type, and it is called curtal sonnet. Variations also came up in sonnet during the age of Romanticism and Victorian age. Modern sonneteers have also made experiments with sonnet. Dear viewers, now very carefully look at the table which is displayed on the screen. There are two major columns in the table. The first column of the table on the screen shows the important types of sonnet. The second column, entitled as features, has 6 subcolumns. These 6 subcolumns show 6 features of a sonnet. These features include the length, form, rhyme scheme, theme, the place of volta, and the meter of the sonnet. In the first column, names of 7 types of sonnet are mentioned. The name of the first type of sonnet is Italian or Petrarchan sonnet. The second type is called English sonnet or Elizabethan sonnet or Shakespearean sonnet. 3 different names to one type of sonnet. English, Elizabethan, and Shakespearean are actually one type. The third type of sonnet is Spenserian sonnet. The fourth one is Miltonic, and the fifth one is curtal sonnet, which was invented by G.M. Hopkins. The sixth type of sonnet is Shelleyan. The seventh one is the modern sonnet. Now come to the second major column and look at carefully the first subcolumn given under the title features. So the first subcolumn indicates the length or the size of the sonnet. Out of the 7 types which are mentioned in the table, 5 types have 14 lines, whereas curtal sonnet has 11 lines and modern sonnet has 16 lines. It means that curtal and modern sonnets are different from other traditional types of sonnet. G.M. Hopkins' invention means curtal sonnet could not become popular even in his own age and even in his own time. And his contemporaries did not follow him, rather they continued to write the traditional sonnets. And it is also very interesting that during the age of G.M. Hopkins and during the Romantic age and the Victorian age, sonnets had been very popular. Now, what about the modern sonnet? At the moment, nothing can be said about the fate of the modern sonnet. Now look at the second subcolumn, which deals with form of the sonnet. This form actually refers to the formation of groups of lines or division of total lines of the sonnet into stanzas. The total lines of the sonnet may be divided into or 3 or 4 or 5 groups of lines. The table clearly shows that there are variations and differences in the patterns and formations of groups or stanzas. Petrarchan and Miltonic sonnets have octave and sestet. It is a pattern, the first 8 lines and the last 6 lines, octave, the first 6 lines, sestet, last 6 lines. Shakespearean and Spenserian sonnets have 3 quatrains and a couplet. A quatrain has 4 lines and a couplet has 2 lines. Curtal sonnet uses 1 sestet, means 6 lines, and then a quatrain means 4 lines, and then a tail of 1 line. Now, Shelleyan sonnet uses 4 tercets or stanzas of 3 lines and a couplet. Modern sonnets, especially the sonnets of Adam Kirsch, have 2 octaves, means 8 lines plus 8 lines. The third subcolumn indicates that there is greater variation in the rhyming patterns. Here I suggest to the learners that they may read the text of sonnets instead of memorizing the rhyme schemes which are presented in this column. The fourth subcolumn deals with the theme. Italian and Elizabethan sonneteers loved the theme of love. Miltonic and G.M. Hopkins had more inclination towards religion. Shelley and other romantic poets presented nature, manifestations of nature, beauty, and other romantic themes like liberty, fraternity, and equality. Modern sonnets have a variety of themes. The fifth column highlights the place of volta. The occurrence of volta depends on the form of the sonnet. If the form of the sonnet has octave sestet pattern, volta will be in the 9th line. If the pattern is 3 quatrains and 1 couplet, volta will be just before the couplet or in the first line of the couplet. It is actually the poet who decides the place of volta. The 6th column refers to the poetic meter. So far as the poetic meter is concerned, only modern sonnet is exception. Except modern sonnets, almost all other types use iambic pentameter.